Welcome to the Contemporary Issues class. My goodness, what a crowd we have today. Great to have everybody here and more coming in. Let them come in the door I see. Come on in. That's okay. We are so pleased today to have Arak with us. And the foundation that he started. We're going to have a slideshow, and the video didn't quite work for us, but the slideshow will be great. And questions. So if you have questions for him, let's let him make his presentation. Excuse me, and then ask questions. But before we do that, our usual announcements. Zoomers, welcome, and please mute yourself on the lower left corner of your screen. And we are recording this for future playback too. And I want to welcome any first timers. I want to welcome Linda, first time just joined the church today. Great. Great. And also, any other announcements on things going on in church? Susie, go ahead.
A friend visiting from Florida.
Florida, welcome. Thanks for having you here. Also, I wanted to share a thing that my wife Vicki and I watched a movie last night. We wanted to recommend it to you that a lot of you have heard about, called Jesus Revolution. It is on Netflix, and I believe Netflix and on Amazon Prime. Really an interesting and true story about a church in California in 1968 that was conservative, had a lot of older people in it, but then hippies came to the church. And it shook things up, and it really revitalized this little church that was going nowhere. And it was really a much better movie than I expected it to be.
I went there for 6 months, 9 months.
Oh, you did?
When I was stationed in Long Beach, my ship was in Long Beach, and I made it somehow or another. I got to Costa Mesa, and I went to the church in circa 1982.
What kind of ship were you on?
Guided missile frigate.
What?
Guided missile frigate.
Oh,
And the movie,
kind of like a destroyer, isn't it?
Exactly.
it didn't destroy too much. But the movie really is a good story and well told and not overly preachy as you might expect some religious movies to be, but we highly recommend it. Very good. It's good. Yeah, on Netflix or Amazon Prime.
What's it called again?
Jesus Revolution. $5 to rent over
And when did this occur? I mean, what?
1968.
Oh,
California.
Called that Jesus Revolution because that's what Time Magazine referred to it as. They called this the Jesus Revolution. The Time Magazine.
The hippie movement of the late 60s and early 70s. Yeah, and it really covers all that very well. Okay, we want to leave plenty of time. But first I want to introduce Peter Van Arsdale, a St. Andrew member and a DU professor who has done a lot of work in Africa and other countries. And so he will introduce Arak.
Or introduce Peggy to introduce Arak.
Okay, good. Okay. And we have a microphone here too. If you use that, some of our folks are a little hard of hearing, and it helps.
Okay, well, it's great to see you. I know many of you. I don't know all of you, but it's great to see you. I have, as Steve says, I have the pleasure of working in East Africa and still do. 10 years ago, approximately 10, 11 years ago, just as Sudan was forming its independent nation, breaking away from Sudan to form the new nation,
Who's that guy?
South Sudan. I was there and had the privilege of co-facilitating a human rights seminar with our South Sudanese colleagues. As the seminar completed, 2 of the lost boys who had been participating in the seminar with stories much like Arak's were kind enough to come forward and thank me for my work by presenting me a cane of the elders, very lovely carved wooden hardwood cane, beautifully carved cane, as a gift. But as Arak knows, that gift comes with something. What it comes with is the responsibility. You got it? Bob and all of our friends know, if you get that cane, it means you must help. It's not just a gift to have and admire in your living room. It means you have to continue to help until you die. So I'm continuing to help, and it's my privilege to continue to help with South Sudan in different ways. Seeds of South Sudan is relatively new to me. Of course, I've known about it for many years, but I'm a more recent participant and advocate. I've worked with several other South Sudanese groups and continue to do so. But delighted to support Seeds of South Sudan, delighted to renew my acquaintance with Iraq. We first met 5 or 6 years ago, and I hadn't seen him again until a week ago, when Peggy and myself and others facilitated a roundtable on South Sudanese issues. We have a lot of South Sudanese expertise in Metro Denver. Not only South Sudanese people, Sudanese and South Sudanese people, but others. We've got an amazing amount of interest and expertise in our area. It's terrific. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend Peggy Gonder. She's one of the leaders of Seeds of South Sudan. And of course, then she'll tell you more and introduce Iraq. So Peggy.
Thank you. I led a service trip for 9 people affiliated with Seeds of South Sudan in September. And that's where I bought my Maasai pants. Sorry, there are none for sale. That's mine. But I did buy a lot of the jewelry, and Sue Counterman is another person. Because I'm a PR person, I can't let this opportunity pass without passing around the sign-up sheet for our electronic newsletter. So shall I start it? Oh, you can, yeah. Please print, because if we don't get a letter right on the email, you will never get it. It's a monthly, we keep it to like 2 or 3 articles, and it's a good way to keep up. The other thing, I'd like to have the other Seeds of South Sudan volunteers in the room to wave your hands, so people can, if you have questions after, and you can, there's a line to speak to Iraq. There's some others of us. My husband John is on the board. He may still be in the hall running the square. I am the volunteer communications director, so I do the web and the Facebook and the newsletters, including the print newsletters. So without further ado, we've known Iraq for about 10 years. He celebrated Thanksgiving with us when he lived here. He founded Seeds of South Sudan after being one of the lost boys of Sudan, and you'll learn more about that in the slideshow. He's dedicated Christian and really dedicated to helping his fellow South Sudanese refugee orphans. Please welcome Iraq Garang.
Good morning. Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for coming. I'm going to share my personal story, and then I will talk a bit about what I do now. First of all, I was born in 1982 in a small village called Paliao. And my parents were farmers. We own cows, we grow our own food. I love cows. When I was little, I was around cows all the time. And life was beautiful. I enjoy being with my parents, being with my friends. But 7 years later, a war broke out, and my village was attacked. And many people were killed, including my parents. But I was lucky. God served me in another way. I was looking after young cows and good in the field. That is what boys usually do in the Dinka community. Maybe I will tell you I'm from the South Sudan 64 tribes, and I'm from the Dinka tribe, which is the largest tribe in South Sudan. The Dinka are known in Africa to be the black people. Many people assume that all people of Africa are black, but that's not how we see it. The Dinka are the most dark people. My cousin is more darker than I do. And we love cows. We own a lot of cows in Africa. People say that the cattle or the cows come from the Dinka. And so when I was 7 years, my village, like I have said, was attacked and many people were killed, including my parents. And God has a grace on me. I was outside with other boys, and from that time we hear a sound of machine gun, and people screaming, and we start running. And we met with other boys from different villages, and the only safe place was to go to the country of Ethiopia. We were lucky we had few adults with us. I was personally lucky. I have my cousin who was 10 years old, and he looked after me, take care of me. That journey we didn't have any food, no clothes, no shoes. So we worked for 3 months. We ate anything that we could get along the way, leaf or tree, fruit, anything we could find. Drink any dirty water we could find along the way. And some of my friends died because of lack of food and lack of water. Some get sick and they were not able to go. And I was afraid that maybe I might die too. But God gave me hope that, I need to keep going and that one day He will use me in another way. So from there, no matter how tired I was, sometimes get sick. I keep going. My cousin encouraged me. And after 3 months of walking, we arrived in Panyindu. That was the refugee camp set up by United Nations. From there, the UN came. There were over 20,000 of us. If you have heard the story of the Lost Boy, 1990s. And the UN came and gave us some food and medicine. And we stayed there for 18 months, and then war broke out again. And we were forced to cross Kilo River, which some of the Lost Boy get thrown, some were eaten by crocodile, hippos, and some get lost. Nobody knows what happened to them until today. So to make a long story very short, we worked for a year along the border because the war was still going on in South Sudan. And we arrived in Kakuma refugee camp in 1992. And the United Nations came again and they provided us with food and water and medicine. So I stayed in Kakuma refugee camp for almost 10 years. But then in 2000, the United Nations talked to the US government to bring the Lost Boy over. And most of the Lost Boy came to the United States between 2001 and 2006. And my story here in the US, I get opportunity to go to school. And I went to Denver Community College and study there for 2 years and get a degree in chemistry. And I went to CU Denver. After I graduated from college, I went back to the refugee camp. And when I saw many orphans on the street, looking at garbage for something to eat, and then I imagined, the food that we have here in the United States that I can eat anytime I want. There is clean water in the house. And I thought, maybe I need to do something. God saved me from all those dangers for a purpose. So I came back and talked to friends. I started by sponsoring 2 kids, to go to school. And then with the help of friends, many people came, and that is the result of Seed of South Sudan. is to give this orphan who has been in refugee camp for a long time, willing to go to school, hoping to get opportunity to improve their life. And that's what we have been doing to give this kid opportunity. We have 150 in our programs. That is from grade 1 to college.
150
Yes, 150.
children.
Yes.
They're still in Sudan.
They are, we got them out of refugee camp and
Okay.
put them in school in a town called Nakuru,
Kenya.
Kenya. Yeah. And several of my friends have been there. Tom Alanda is there, was the first person to go and see the kid that we support. And many people, John, Peggy. We have 22 people that have visited Kakuma refugee camp. And it's horrible there. When I was there, we ate one a day. We didn't have enough food. Sometimes we go for 3 days without food.
Days without food.
Yes. I tell the kid when I speak to kids in high school and middle school, and the thing is not that you cannot make it. But when you don't have choice, you can go for 6 days without food. And when we get this kid out of Kakuma refugee camp, it's not only to give them education, but also to give them this opportunity that they could have enough food to eat. When I was in that camp, I never ate until I said I don't want food. And the only food that we used to eat, bean and corn. Yes, every day. If you are lucky, no meat. We used to eat one a day, you know. And the situation has get worse in the camp now because millions of refugees came around the world. So it's not like when I used to be there. And because of the war, civil war that has been going on in Sudan and South Sudan, like Peter has mentioned, it forced a lot of people to come to the refugee camp. And especially when you go to the refugee camp, the people that are there are elderly people, women, orphans. That is the population that is there. And South Sudanese are 160,000. There are also other refugees from Somali, from Congo, from Ethiopia. Well, the mission of State of South Sudan is to, Sudan has been going through a lot of suffering for many decades. My mission, or the mission of State of South Sudan, is to give these people, these orphan opportunity to get education so that they could be future leaders of South Sudan. And we have taken some students through seminary. They have graduated 2 students. We have 2 that have graduated also from University of Nairobi, one with accounting degree and one with a degree in statistics and economy. Yeah, and he is now doing his master's. His sponsor, Tom Alanda, has been committed to help him as long as he wants with his education. So today, my mission is to hope that if there is a saying, you cannot change the world, but you could change the world of one person. Seeing this orphan growing up in our program and become an adult and graduated from college, like our team who has graduated with a degree in accounting, is working now in South Sudan with the bank, with the central bank. So the mission is to help one child at a time. You can pray for our programs. You could pray for this kid. You could volunteer. There are so many ways you could help in our programs. you could be a sponsor to give someone a hope. And you could be a board member, could join a board. There are so many ways that you could help. It's a long story, so I'm going to stop here. And some of board members and friends who are here, who have been part of State of South Sudan, are here, and you could ask me some questions. They can also help answering some questions because they have been there, not only one time, several times. So thank you so much for having me. The Bible says in the book of Psalm 107, verse 1, give thanks to God, for he is good, and his love endures forever. I am very thankful, and I'm here because of goodness of God. And thank you for having us, for the love that you have, and for calling us over today. And thank you so much. And please ask any question you might have about Sudan. Peter is here, who has been involved a lot. All of us could answer any question that you might have.
Yeah, comfortable there. You live in Denver full-time now? Go ahead. And then go back to Sudan.
I used to live in Denver full time, but now I'm living in Kenya full time, where my family is. And I come here for 2 months or 3 months. So this is an opportunity for me to raise support for the 2 months that I'm going to be here.
The question in the back one.
Susie,
I've heard you talk before, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, it was quite a while ago. And you were gonna go back and get married, did you do that?
More than 5 years.
Good question. Yes, I got married.
You had a bride set, and yeah.
Yes, I have speak in couple places. I don't in many different places. Let me say.
So
And,
we did get married.
yes, I get married actually after I graduated from CU. I went back and get married.
Yeah, I remember you had talked about that, you were, at that time, you were gonna be going back, when I saw you last.
do you have children?
Yes, I do. I have 6 kids.
Oh, 6? How old are they?
15 to 2 years old.
15 to 2 years old, 6 years. Very good. Okay,
Boys and girls,
question.
boys
Is
and
it
girls.
boys and girls?
Yes, 1 girl, 5 boys.
Norma, do you have a question?
No, it was just 5 boys.
I'd like to add one thing that was later in the slideshow. He made the right call to take questions. I led a service trip, as I mentioned, Sue Counterman, who has gone multiple times and has done girls leadership and boys leadership. She's planning to go back in August of 2024. So please let us know if you'd like to be on the list to be updated about that. It's about, it takes 2 days to get there because you fly through Europe, and then it's 9 hours from Europe down to Nairobi. You have no idea till you've been there how big Africa is. So name and email if you're interested, and we'll keep you in touch.
You have to ask Iraq while we are thinking about it. There's been a lot in the news about Sudan now with the civil war. The American embassy, people have left the country just a couple of weeks ago. What is it like in Sudan now for people?
Well, the situation of Sudan now is very difficult, and people need to be rescued from there. We in South Sudan, we are receiving many refugees that are coming from Sudan, and we are worried too that the situation might spread to South Sudan.
We just add a couple of points if I might, Steve.
Sure.
That's a good question. As you folks know, with South Sudan having broken away through independence from Sudan, there's these two neighboring countries with similar issues, as Iraq is suggesting, and as Steve is suggesting, there's civil war in Sudan now, and has been civil war in South Sudan. Isn't it ironic that South Sudan, which struggles with resources, struggles with leadership, struggles with tribalism, and this is no diminution of the Dinka or other many friends that are there in South Sudan. Tribalism is, I'm sure you'd agree, Iraq, a major issue when tribes are in conflict, and they often are. It's ironic, isn't it? As Iraq was suggesting, here the Sudan situation, which is just in the news this month, is sending refugees to South Sudan, which has virtually no ability to help them. That's the irony of that. And yet, of course, the South Sudanese, generous as they are at heart, Iraq and others are trying, but they have virtually no resources, and they have a weak, dysfunctional government in both Sudan and South Sudan.
Carol, go ahead.
Oh, sure, you can ask me or Peggy or.
Can you go and just explain briefly why there is so much conflict? I work with many Africans who are from other parts of Africa that are very stable, they're well educated, middle class and upper middle class, and I guess I don't get it. I mean, why is that particular area having so many, what is the cause of it?
Well, I'll let Iraq respond, and Peggy or any of our friends, Tom, you bet.
Well, you are right. Most of African countries are stable and they are enjoying peace. What situation in Sudan has been very complicated because of religion, religious ideas and ideologies, and conflict of natural resources. And you are right, Sudan has been in war for a long time. And that is what caused the separation of Sudan and South Sudan now. And the hope was that, separating these two countries will bring peace. But it didn't. Conflict is still going on. Sudan, is fighting now because of the military coup, and now the military guys are fighting each other. But then in South Sudan, there is this conflict between tribe and political domination that has been going on. So it is very complicated sometimes because of these many different tribes. We speak many different languages. Something small could create conflict. And I don't know if you guys are lucky, you speak one language, so there is no misunderstanding and things like that. And sometimes you guys feel like, oh, you are behind, you just speak one language. And other countries speak many different languages. There is an advantage in that. And there is also disadvantage when you have many different tribes don't understand themselves and sometimes. And this tribal thing in Africa is common. If some of you read in the news, especially in Kenya, where I now live, during election, there is a problem because these politicians run for office and they need backing from their own tribe. And people always like to vote for someone who speaks the same language or guidelines. They don't just vote for you because of your ideas. I think just because you belong to that tribe. And
in America too.
well, maybe along party line in America, but that's why our situation is complicated.
Are they Christian, predominantly Christian, or are there other religions involved? And what effect would that have on the
What are the
individual?
religions in Sudan? South Sudan?
In South Sudan, the main religion is South Sudan is 90% Christian, but there is a small number of Muslims that live there. And the religious issue was the big thing when Sudan was won. And that was one of the reasons why Bush administration push for peace and that Sudan be divided into two.
Darfur.
Yes. So,
So religion was a factor.
yes, religion was one of the big issues that caused the separation of two countries.
Would it be correct to say these tribal conflicts in South Sudan are primarily religious in nature between the Muslim minority and the Christian majority?
I don't think so.
Not really.
Not really.
They are more tribal based. They are more of power.
Yes.
People fighting over the powers.
I have a question, you know, with the rest of Africa being more stable, why is it just because they don't want to give up their tribal ways? Whereas the rest of Africa has I mean, they've resolved that tribal.
Yes, you are right. It is mostly just because South Sudan is a new country, and with so many different tribes who are there. So mostly it is a tribal based conflict. Yes.
Is that, would you say that Africa is a tribal-based country, period?
Well, Africa, has many different tribes in every country, but in South Sudan is a little bit complicated because there are 64. Some countries is less than maybe 10 tribes who speak different languages. So, but with so many different tribes in South Sudan, it gets more complicated.
If I can recommend a book, one Gary Mathai won the Nobel Peace Prize. She was the one who led the Green Belt movement to plant 1 million trees in Kenya. And she wrote a book called The Challenge of Africa. You can get it secondhand for $4 through Aid Books. And she talks about colonialism as part of the root. You remember in Rwanda, it was the Hutus and the Tutsis, and I think Rwanda was French and British. Anyway, whoever the colonial power was favored the
Belgium had a role in there.
yeah.
Belgium too.
So lots of times, some of these deep-seated, but to me, and there's another man, Ken Scott, who was a international prosecutor with the International Criminal Court, and he curates a daily email of news stories. And to me, both in Sudan and South Sudan, it's two power-hungry men who are playing the race card to stay in power, no matter who the leaders in South Sudan have been accused of using starvation as a weapon of war.
Hey, let's take Jim next.
I think, as you explained, that one of the major problem in your country is the multiplicity of languages. Having a common language is a great blessing. And
Yes,
it would
it is.
help to have peace. We have an example in our good neighbor Canada. They have problems because they have French and English. If they had just the one language, it'd solve a lot of their.
I agree. I agree.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Hi, John Odell. I just wanted to add on this discussion very quickly. I think maybe focusing on tribalism is a little misleading. That is, most of the countries of the world don't have civil wars. England had a civil war in the 17th century. That's right. Based on religion. They haven't had a civil war in England lately. Back then, we didn't call it tribalism.
Sure.
But the reason they haven't had civil war lately is that institutions develop confidence over generations, and people learn to count on the institutions to keep things peaceful and so forth. In South Sudan, they don't have confidence in those institutions for good reason. I wouldn't either if I were there. And so people turn to the things they know. The people around them. Maybe that's a tribe in some countries, but the same thing is true in Latin America, Southeast Asia, and so forth. That's why we have civil war.
For sure.
Ron,
In the history of the United States, one of the first indigenous Indian nations was the Iroquois Nation. That bonded together at least 6 different tribes up in New England, New York. They worked together and they had a legislative body sort of, where they worked the 6 tribes together. Have there been any examples in South Sudan or Sudan where different tribes have managed to at least not fight everybody, not their tribe, and form some alliances or bonds? Or has that been an extreme rarity? Has it been almost all unique singular tribes that only focus inward on their own tribe?
Well, that's a good question. There are several tribes that work together. But when there are these 2 tribes fighting, or 2 leaders and trying to get support from many different tribes, it ends up that the whole country is in war, or all the tribes in war, just because with the politics, you go around and mobilize other tribes to support your ideas. So,
Rock, if I could add something to your comment and to the good question. The only reason I'm standing up is because otherwise
That's okay.
I'd be way down low and you couldn't see me. In Darfur, which is Western Sudan, where I had the privilege of working some years ago, and where genocide later broke out in the early 2000s, as you folks will recall, a terrible genocide, which had some of the complexities that Iraq is alluding to in terms of tribal issues, religious issues, military and paramilitary issues, central government power issues, peripheral government response issues. All those things were at play when the Darfur genocide unfolded over a period of several years. Yet several tribes, of course, there work together effectively, such as the Dar, the four, who live in Darfur, and others, the Masalit and others, work together as best they could, but again, there's also conflict. So there was collegiality and conflict both, and interacting with all these other forces. You know, in South Sudan, I have to say too, Iraq, autocracy is another terrible issue in South Sudan. Not that it isn't in other places.
And what's that mean?
What is that?
Well, taking away corruptly from others, you know, for your own gain. So this happens, wouldn't you say, Iraq, rather widely in South Sudan among many of the leaders.
Give us an example.
Well, some of the leaders have developed very nice estates in places like Uganda. That takes a lot of money to develop an estate. If you're a South Sudanese person suddenly living in a nice place in Kampala, Uganda.
See, that's starting to sound like Nicaragua right now.
Well.
Daniel Ortega.
Yeah, but
Have any
some
questions
similarity.
about our organization, Seeds of South Sudan, because we are by design, well, it's sort of evolved that way, but by design, they're being educated in a safe place. Kenya is one of those stable countries. English is the official language. Most people also speak Swahili. Our kids come in speaking Dinka, and then they learn Swahili in a refugee camp, and then they're thrust into Roots Academy and suddenly having to learn a third language. I failed in my download of the video. We were going to share a video of Yardang, and she came and she was scored at the bottom in first grade, and she refused to use her mother tongue and was trying to learn Dinka and English. And by the end of first grade, she was at the top. And in 8th grade, what the Kenyan education system does, they're very test driven. And 1 million 8th graders took an exit exam, and Yar scored above 400, which put her in the top 0.5% of 1 million Kenyans. So that shows you the potential of these orphans that we're getting out of the refugee camp.
So can we help by sponsoring one student, for example,
Absolutely,
or
yes.
donating in general to the whole foundation?
That's right.
Either way.
That's right. It's a 501c3, and you can donate through the website, or it's $1,800 a year to sponsor a child, and that covers their tuition, books, room and board, the 9 months they're in school, but also feeding them buying them clothes, any medical care while they're at home base on breaks. But even monthly donors of $20 a month, you know, people sign up in good faith. We've had a couple of longtime donors turn 94 and they say, I'm done. And so, you know, those monthly donors help until we can get someone.
Well, we will look as a Sunday school class how to help.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
And we do have a
Thank you,
list
Steve.
of children who were interviewed last summer. There's a little card on each one. If you want to pick one. That we have mostly girls out there this morning. We had Deanna interviewed 15 kids in California. She was just there, and some of those kids with very serious medical conditions that already gotten sponsored.
We've got 15 minutes left. I want to give our Zoomers a chance to ask a question. If you have one, go ahead. You're not interrupting by speaking up now. Does anybody have a question on Zoom? Okay, if not, that's okay. Back here, Linda.
Yeah, of the 150 that have been educated in Kenya, are many of those now involved with helping educate others? Are they staying in Kenya? Are they returning to South Sudan?
We have three who have returned to South Sudan, especially the seminary graduate. They are helping now in a small seminary that is being started up by another South Sudanese. And we have a few who are helping with our program in Nakuru.
So what happens, we have 55 that have finished high school and we're trying to get either trade school or university. So most of them want to go on to university because that education has been so much of a focus. So why don't you talk about the service trip to South Sudan for the high school graduates?
Sure. When students, after they graduated from high school, they go on a 1 year trip of service. Most of them work as teachers, work on the farm, and even do some fishing in the Nile. They help connect with the surviving relatives in South Sudan. So it gives them a lot of opportunity to get connected to the culture and to the people. And and then after 1 year of serving in South Sudan, they come back and teach in Kakuma refugee camp, while we are looking for opportunities either to go to trade school or to go to university.
And that's a big need right now. We have 11 high school graduates because of schools being closed 8 months during COVID. 6, I think, graduated in March of 22, and then another 5, or I may have those numbers reversed. Anyway, we have 11 now. And it costs $100 a month to feed them at home base. So we like them to go to Kakuma if they're getting ready to start college. Because they're more highly educated than a lot of the other people teaching with a high school diploma. So it costs $1,000 per student to take the grueling 2-day trip from Nakuru, Kenya, which is sort of southwest, up through Uganda, because that's the safe route. And they go to Iraq's people who have been in an internally displaced persons camp for 4 years because the Nile River flooded 4 years. So
what is it that they need right now?
we need money, donations to pay the fare, the $1,000 per student to get to South Sudan so they can volunteer for a year. And they take the bus and then they have to do Land Rover or something. They have to get a passport for South Sudan. They have to get visas for Uganda and South Sudan. So
Jan.
When you said that you take service group or that
Yes.
you take mission groups from here
right.
and go there, what do those groups do?
So we did a health screening. Let me stand up with microphone. So the service trip, I was very fortunate that we had a nurse. You might bring up the picture of the lady in blue. They had Byron, her husband, is vice president of the board, and they had done a health screening at a school for the deaf in Nairobi, connected with a different. And she said, oh, we did 350, 75 is a piece of cake. And so most of us were lay people. I did the eye screening. She was listening for a heart murmur if you've had a malaria. And so I think that Strip will definitely do a health screening. The person, Sue Counterman, is a 6th grade middle school teacher, and she likes to do leadership training. So that would be something. We also sing with them. I go to Mountain View Presbyterian. They gave us a grant. We were able to buy a keyboard. The kids can take piano as an elective. And so I'm gonna, it's not up yet, but I have a little video to upload. We have a YouTube channel. If you want to subscribe, Seeds of South Sudan, you'll be notified. So Mary Hanson was playing Amazing Grace, and these kids are very faithful Christians. They became Christians under the leadership of the elders in Kalkuma. And they actually, most of the schools offer Christian religious education as a class. One of the kids was put in a Muslim school, and Iraq was able to get them transferred because that would be very isolating, you know, to be the only Christian, as well as, and the college kids told us that the Kenyan students discriminate against them in Nairobi. And we said, how can they tell you're not Kenyan, of course, white person, and they're much taller and they're much darker. So they do face some discrimination. But they also, Roots Academy, which is 1,000 kids, is very accepting. Iraq has worked with the owner of that for a number of years.
So are those trips, one trip, 1 week, two weeks?
Yeah.
Do they go to Kenya? Do they go to Sudan?
Oh, yeah, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, it is going to Kenya. You fly into Nairobi and then travel by, we have some very reliable drivers that will take us to Nakuru. And so we did, actually, if you can, so that's the nurse listening for the heart and intestinal parasites, and then go down 2 more. So that is at Africa Heart Lodge in Nairobi. Tom Pond was teaching the university students about interviewing, how to make a good first impression, how quickly people judge you when you walk into the room. And we felt like that was an important life skill for them to have. And then we repeated that class. And another volunteer talked about resume writing and a cover letter. And there is Deanna, wave Deanna, in Kalkuma. So it's flying into Nairobi. It's generally about a week, although it's probably more like 11 days by the time you spend 2 days getting there and 2 days back. Africa Heart Lodge is a nonprofit that works with women who have HIV/AIDS, and so we really connected with them. And then in Nakuru, we stay at Rift Valley Sports Center, which is a private club, but we were able, through the owner of Roots Academy, to stay there. So it's generally a week, and it's kind of designed by the people who get there. It is at your own expense. I had asked my team to each give a $300 donation, which is tax deductible. That you just made it to Seeds of South Sudan, because part of what we do is take the kids. When Sue does it, there's usually girls leadership one day and boys leadership another at Roots Academy. And she spoke last Sunday at her church, and she said these girls had never had cake. So that was a big deal. We didn't pay for the cake. We had a lot of other things to pay for, but we did age related. So there was one class for the K through 8 and another for the 9 through 12. So it's pretty much up to the group that's going to help kind of design that. But thank you for clarifying that. It's about $1,900 to fly from Denver to Nairobi. So
What are the other expenses? That it, just the.
well, your food and lodging. I could.
1, 2, 3.
Are expensive.
Thank you. We've got about 7 minutes left. I want to ask you a church question, Harak. Here at our church, we accept gay people very much. We ask them to come and feel welcome here. And I know in Africa, that's not done very much. that's our impression, is that gay people are not accepted at many churches in Africa. Is that true? And how is it in Sudan?
Well, I don't know more about many churches, but I know that there are some churches that accepted gay people. There are some churches that they don't accept, or some churches, they say, all of you are welcome. You don't need to tell us who you are. We are all people of God. That is what I know, especially in Sudan and Kenya. Yeah.
Thank you.
Uganda has been one of the harshest because of their president.
Mm.
And it's most unfortunate, yeah, and thus that percolates because Uganda is quite powerful in that region. And so that percolates into places like South Sudan, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia. Congo, his percolation effect is ominous,
Is it dangerous to be a gay person in
especially in Uganda,
Uganda?
less so in South Sudan.
Attacked and killed?
Yes, people have been killed in Uganda. Yeah, it's less dangerous in South Sudan, but not, as the Rock says, not fully accepted, yet there are churches that do accept gay people in South Sudan.
I have a question. Is the Muslim religion predominant in some of those? How does the Muslim religion fit in with Africa in general?
It's more predominant in Sudan than in South Sudan.
And it's the Mediterranean, they spread west from the Middle East, so it's the Egypt, all those countries are Muslim, and then the ones farther south. There's a book called The 10th Parallel that talks about the dividing line between Christianity and Africa, and
Bible says it all.
Question back here, and then we'll take Jim's question. Who had a question back here? Oh, yeah.
I would just be interested in knowing more about the refugee camp where they get their schooling, their education. What does a day look like for them? Is that too?
Well, in refugee camp, life is difficult, and the United Nations try to provide some education. And most of the time, they don't have qualified teachers. They have big classes, like 500 students. In my
500 students
in one class.
in one class.
Yeah. So some kids don't get opportunity even to go to school. They just walk around the street and look for things to eat or things to do. In my case, when I was there, we used to write on the deck using our fingers. Under the trees, we didn't have any benches or anything to write. But it is now.
Do they have books? Yeah, books and materials or?
Not enough material. Sometimes the United Nations try to provide books, but not enough.
Hey, Rock, can I throw something?
Sure, Tom.
Yeah, when Iraq was over there at the refugee camp, when he was, when he got there, with what, 9 years old or so?
Yeah.
Yeah, he learned how to read and write with his finger in the dirt, or the mud, or a piece of charcoal on a piece of cardboard.
Oh.
That was his education there. When he came over here, when he was 20, he passed his GED.
Oh, my God.
Wow. He went on to study chemistry, got his degree in economics, was working on his master's. He's going to seminary now. So to just learn perseverance, a very smart man,
Yes.
but it's just what he had to overcome. And now his life's mission is to get other kids out of refugee camp, get them educated. So that's
Thank you, Tom. Good perspective. Jim.
In the discussion today, I hear the word, and I understand that the center of this is in Nairobi. But it always amazes me about, and I guess with 5 minutes left, we can't have a whole discussion about geopolitics. But I never hear the words, of Addis Ababa, and I don't hear Asmara, and I never hear Cairo. And I never hear, any of the other major, cities that are in that region, mentioned. And there's an enormous amount of, I mean, maybe there's just so much separation that they don't even know that the other ones exist. I don't understand why there isn't an interaction.
Well, there is the African Union that is trying to intervene in places. You know, Ethiopia is having its own problems with the Tigray people.
So they've had problems for the last 75 years. So. I mean, is Eritrea isolated? Is Eritrea isolated?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, Eritrean's dictator, Isaias Afwerki, is one of the most ominous, in my view, one of the most ominous leaders in the world. He's attempting to gain greater influence over all of the Horn of Africa. And he's formed an alliance with Abiy Ahmed, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. Addis Ababa does reach the news in those regards, Jim, because the
But you mean Eritrea and Addis Ababa
they have an alliance now, yes.
alliance? That's a word that didn't even.
Yeah, it didn't used to exist. It does now. It's because of the two leaders, Abiy Ahmed, who ironically had family in Aurora, Colorado, before he became prime minister. And then Isaias Afwerki. Just interestingly, since you mentioned Eritrea, because its impact is felt elsewhere, including as far as South Sudan. So your question is a good one.
It's very close.
And they're not that far apart. That's
I
right.
took a bus there.
Eritrea,
from
this little
Asmara to
country of a few million people, Ethiopia is large, Eritrea is small population wise. Eritrea proportionally has the largest military force in Africa proportionate to its size. And it has probably sent the most proportionate to its size refugees out because of the sad state of affairs under Isaias Afwerki.
Okay, we are about out of time, unfortunately. We want to thank Arat for your time today, and we pray for your career, for your ambition, and for your family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The sign up sheet, I it's going around. I have it. Okay. Right.
Thank
Oh,
you,
good.
everybody. See you next week.
Stay seated until the group